Welcome to what promises to be an incredible half an hour for everyone aspiring to up their leadership game today. You're joining us for a very special conversation as part of our learning series, exploring the life cycle and the evolution of leadership. Leadership isn't static, it evolves, it adapts, it transforms every day. And the challenges that leaders are facing today are very different than the challenges that leaders faced in the past, nor are they any similar with what leaders will be facing tomorrow. That's why we're bringing together this incredible group of insightful speakers, leaders, people that have been in the seat, people who have studied it, observed it, to share their observations, what it takes for leadership to evolve, to mature, and to grow. And I'm incredibly honored today to welcome Carol Tomé to our learning series to share her perspective on her leadership. Carol, thank you for joining us.
Well, Claudius, it's my honor. Thank you for inviting me on.
Carol, I said this earlier in our quick catch up. It's really truly unique. Out of the 2,000 CEOs, more than 2,000 CEOs that we covered, you bring a unique perspective to this topic. You'd been you'd been the CFO at Home Depot for 18 years. You sat on the board at UPS for 17 years, and yet you still discovered things about this role that you felt you hadn't prepared for. And the gap between what you think you know about the job and what the job actually requires is really what this learning series is about. And I'm so glad that we found half an hour to learn from you firsthand. Tell us a little bit about, what were the perspectives that you had gathered before you stepped into the role, and what was it that you expected, and what was it that you found?
Well, I onboarded in March of 2020, just as the world was getting ready to shut down due to the
Right.
global COVID-19 pandemic. And as chair of the audit committee of UPS for a number of years, we reviewed our enterprise risk management framework every year. And I thought I had a pretty good handle of the risks facing UPS, but we had never talked about a global pandemic.
Right.
So when I walked in, it was pandemonium
Yeah.
because we were essential workers. We knew we couldn't, shut down, shelter in place. We had to continue to work and to move commerce and serve the people who were doing just that, shutting down and sheltering in place. So it was a bit of pandemonium. We weren't prepared, but we were, the culture of UPS, it stood tall during that time. We were able to gather together the protective gear we needed to keep our people safe. We changed our operating plans. We ended up hiring 40,000 people into the company to get us, in a position where we could serve our customers. And so I wasn't ready for it. I certainly wasn't ready for it. But the culture of UPS stood tall during that time. But what I also learned, Claudius, about culture is this. It can kind of be a curse too.
Mhm. Yeah.
UPSers, they deal with anything that comes their way. It's amazing, just the ability to come together and to deliver.
Yeah.
But the culture was really command and control. I didn't understand that as a board member. It was really command and control. And so when we started to actually talk to people about how happy they were and whether or not they would recommend us as a place to work, it was kind of like, not so much. And when you asked why, it's like, well, there's not innovation here. There's no empowerment here. And I'm like, really? As a board member, I thought of UPS as an innovative company, but actually, because it was such a command and control environment, our people didn't really think of us as innovative or empowering. And furthermore, we really didn't let people bring their real, genuine, authentic self to work. Our policies were so restrictive. If you were African American, you couldn't have natural hair. If you were a male, you couldn't have facial hair. And our tattoo policy was more restrictive than the
Yeah.
US Army.
Wow.
None of these things I knew. None of these things I knew. And I'm like, I know that culture and happy employees are so important to productivity and customer experience and all good things. So we really leaned into sort of changing the culture,
Right.
holding on to what's the best of UPS, but changing the culture. And I think that's worked out pretty well. Now, when we measure employee satisfaction and we look at how they rate us on areas of empowerment or innovation,
Mm.
We rate in the high 80s, if not
Wow.
over 90%.
Wow. Wow. It's so striking because many of the leaders that I'll be working with who are knocking at the door, they know that they're likely to transition into the role in a matter of months, maybe a year, right? They feel this sense of impatience of just let me run with it. I've been preparing for this all my life. I've been in the boardroom. I've done this. I've done that. I've seen the company. There's been incredible preparation work that went into it. Yet the surprise that hits you when you're actually taking the baton is just something that seems to overwhelm many, right? And I'm wondering, like, how did you adapt in the moment, right? What were some of those detection mechanisms that helped you to pivot from, oh, as a board member, I'd never seen about this culture piece,
Yeah.
about the command and control, and I need to pivot here because there's 100 other things that you could potentially being drawn to.
Well, the first thing I did, it was COVID, but I went out into
Mm,
to the business.
yeah,
I've spent time
yeah,
out in the field. I was in our operations, I was with our drivers, I was with people, and heard from them firsthand what mattered to them and really tried to lean into what mattered to them. You know, as a board member, I would go into the buildings that the company wanted me to see, the bright, shiny, new, highly automated buildings that were super impressive. I hadn't got into most
yeah,
of the buildings that were not maintained,
yeah,
candidly. And so I walked them. And I'm like, okay, we've got to move to programmatic maintenance here. Our bathrooms hadn't been remodeled, our break rooms hadn't been remodeled.
yeah,
So just by observing, I was able to put together a program to basically up the maintenance in our buildings, which helps with employee satisfaction. So I think that's super important for anybody who's onboarding is you got to get into the business. You
yeah,
can't run it from your office. You just can't do it. You got to get out. You got to see it firsthand. You know, and for me, Claudius, the first time I went out, it was so interesting. They had built a stage, there were flowers, there was like the band, there were
right.
gifts.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's all, what's this? I mean,
How do I
what's
get into
this?
incognito mode? Right? Yeah.
Like, this is not good. This is not good. And, and
Right.
and so yeah, from then on, I just went out unannounced because I'm like, we're not, I'm gonna talk to people. And rather than going out, oftentimes people go out with a list of things people need to do.
Yeah.
I don't do that either. I bring back a list of things that I can do to make
Right.
it better for them.
Right. Yeah. And wow. By the way, it's wonderful to have this conversation, but I don't want to monopolize it. Anyone who's watching and listening right now, please put questions into the chat. We'll see if we can get there today. If not, we'll be answering them following our session here. But please come in, right? This is a community. Carol, you had something beautiful to say about the book that really made Bob and me so proud after all these years of work collecting and researching the different trends and the patterns that we're seeing, which was you said, well, I wish I had this book in 2020 when I started, and now that I'm 5 years into the role, I'm beginning to take my lessons from it. Tell us a little bit more. What was it that you wish that you had that the book was able to teach you?
Well, there are stages of in a or a life cycle that CEOs go through, and that's what your research shows. And
Mm,
for me, really helpful to think about the reinvention
mm,
stage.
yeah,
And I would have liked to have thought about the reinvention stage when I started rather than what I'm doing now.
yeah,
But in some ways, Claudius, I also think that our situation over the past 6 years has been a little bit different
yeah.
because you do put the life cycle into stages. But for me, I can put the past 6 years into thirds. The first 2 years were all about COVID, candidly.
Mm,
So launch was actually COVID. The second 2 years, which maybe should be calibration, was actually for us dealing with the largest labor negotiation that had ever happened in the history of the United States. So calibrating in the face of a labor contract is sort of interesting,
mm.
but it all
Right.
did lead to reinvention. And now we're deep into the reinvention phase, which is the best part of the phases, if you ask me. It really is the best part. There's a
Thank
lot
you.
of excitement at the beginning,
Yeah.
but reinvention is the best.
Yes, it is. It's difficult, but when you figure out the direction that you want to reinvent into, it's exciting, right? It breathes new life into everybody.
It's so exciting. The way I share it with our teams, I said the best way to protect your future is to create it.
Yes.
Create your future. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Yet on the path to get there, and I fully acknowledge what you're saying, right? Like we saw this in the in the study of every individual leader, right? Like every journey is unique. Everyone's battling their own context, right? We had Nitin Noria on this series a few weeks ago, where we talked about the importance of contextual intelligence, contextual leadership, and how important it is to adapt and evolve and think about these stages. Think about your own stages and how you grow. But on this path towards reinvention, right? There's this moment where I'm sure doubt creeps in, right? So for you, like if I, your first year was an incredible year. You doubled the stock, right? Yet you've only been in the role for a year. It's COVID. Everything is going on. And then in the second year, the labor negotiations, the stock's not performing quite the same as in the first year. It grew by about 2%. Now you see the bigger picture. You know where you're going. You see, what's coming. But how do you manage your own psychology through periods like that where doubt may creep in?
Well, when I joined the company, I said, we're going to double the market cap in 3 years.
Yeah.
It happened in year one. Candidly, the stock got ahead of itself. And it
Right.
got ahead of itself because of COVID.
Yeah.
And so, there's no one more disappointed than me on our
Yeah.
stock price performance. No one more disappointed.
Mm.
But I believe in my heart, I know how to create value. And I
Yeah.
know what we're doing now from a reinvention perspective
Yeah.
is that we deliver against our strategic plan, and we're going to create a whole lot of value for our
Yeah.
shareholders. So it's a journey. It's a journey, and if you don't lose sight of the prize, and if you play the long game, if you live in the short game, you're not going to be very happy, and you might have a lot of doubt on yourself.
Yeah.
But if you play the long game, and you know where you're going, and you know the levers that you need to turn to
Yeah.
create value, and we do, we're going to do just that.
Yeah. Tell us more about the reinvention of UPS, the reinvention of yourself, because this is really the moment where leadership bifurcates, right? It's the double down or reinvent, right? Like you
Yeah.
said, you die by the quarter. You win when you take the long horizon. And in those years 3, 4, 5, that's where we see the biggest drops and CEOs opting out. This is a moment where you reinvent and set a new tone for the direction. What does that look like for you? Where do you take UPS going forward?
Well, it started with a deep understanding of what's happening within our industry. And the logistics industry, particularly small package, is going through rapid fire
Yeah.
change. And we could have ignored it, but
Yeah.
that would have been foolhardy because there's changes in package characteristics, there's change in the competitive landscape, there's change in the drivers of demand.
Yeah.
We had to understand actually what's happening to our industry to determine where we needed to go. And as we, really had an honest, candid look at what was happening, we said, okay, we're going to have to make some change.
Yeah.
Because you see, we had driven a lot of our growth on the backs of one customer. Okay.
Yeah.
But that customer had a large penetration in our business, over 10% of our business with one customer.
Right.
And it wasn't just our largest customer, it was actually not a profitable customer. We were losing money on that.
Mm.
So if you, in the face of dynamic industry change, to have handcuffs on you because you're not making money on your largest customer, well, it inhibits your ability to actually grow in the areas where you want to grow. So we made a big, bold call, about a little over a year ago, to glide that volume down with our largest customer. And we're on path to take it down by 50% by June of 2026. And what that allows us to do, a few things: reconfigure our network so that we optimize the network to grow in the areas of the market where we want to grow. And one of those areas is really leaning into complex healthcare logistics.
Mm.
Complex healthcare logistics is just that, complex. It requires cold chain. Can you imagine, we're delivering life-saving medication.
Right.
If there's an excursion, in other words, there's a temperature problem, or it doesn't get delivered on time, it's not a package anymore, it's a patient. And that requires investing. And so we're freeing up dollars so we can invest in cold chain logistics. And last year, our healthcare logistics business grew 6%. This year, it's going to grow 12%. So, and it's a real opportunity. With the explosion of biopharmaceuticals, it's just a real opportunity for us. So I'm super excited about that. So we're leaning into healthcare logistics. We're leaning into small and medium size. We see opportunities in the face of global change, because a lot of global change going on right now,
Right.
there's an opportunity to invest in trade lanes to enhance our time in transit. So we're opening up a brand new air hub in the Philippines and expanding our air hub in Hong Kong. And we've opened up a gateway in Malaysia, a gateway in Vietnam. So we're taking advantage actually of changes in trade lanes. Because you see, we play end to end. We serve every step of a company's supply chain from procurement to final mile. So
Right.
it's a real opportunity for us to do just that and to do it in a way that's more productive and efficient than we have before by reconfiguring our network and leveraging technology in new and different ways.
Yeah. And yet I cannot overlook the as difficult and as challenging COVID was for all of us, and as much of a challenge it must have presented to you stepping into the role. I'm sure there's important lessons that you were learning during that time, how to think about complex healthcare delivery in different ways, right? But what we also see in our work is the team that helps a CEO step into the role, navigate those first couple of years, often is not the same team that helps a CEO lead through that reinvention phase, right? And those are difficult decisions to be made, right? So how do you orient the team? How do you bring new capabilities in? How do you help your leaders evolve faster than the world is changing? How do you shift that collective mindset, right? How do you orient into a different business line altogether? Um, Tell us a little bit about how you thought about evolving the people around you, and what's the hardest part of that?
Well, I learned a long time ago, long
Mm,
time ago, that my success was highly dependent upon the team that supported me.
yeah.
People that were better than me, faster than me, smarter than me. You know, if surround yourself with the right team, they're going to lift you up and give you wings so you can do amazing things. So I'm all about that. And in fact, you know, I couldn't be more proud of the executive leadership team that I have today. I think they're just an amazing group of leaders. But we've
Mhm.
had significant change. If I think about the team I started working with now
Yeah.
6 years ago, seven of them have moved on.
Yeah.
I've brought in four new leaders, and the team is actually smaller. But here's the cool thing about the leadership team. Of my executive leaders, five of them have combined UPS experience of over 140 years. So
Wow.
they really know the business. And then
Yeah.
two of them have less than 5 years of experience with us. So it's a nice combination of those who've been around here for a while, as well as some new talent that we've brought in. But it doesn't just stop at the executive leadership team. You know, I've taken talent and talent development deep into the
Yeah.
organization. So I think that's really important to have a
Yeah.
strong bench of talent and to understand. And this was a cultural change.
Yeah.
We used to value tenure over talent. Tenure matters a whole lot,
Right.
but you shouldn't value it over talent. So we've been able to really move the needle in that regard too. And then in terms of the reinvention journey, how do we make sure that our leaders are have the right skills in their personal toolkit to support this
Mm.
leadership journey? A few years ago, I'm like, we got to up our digital game. So we worked with a local university here in Atlanta, Georgia, and created a digital fluency program and put our leaders through digital fluency. Guess what we're doing now? AI fluency, right?
It's almost the
Putting
other
them all
way.
through AI
Yeah.
fluency,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I think the learning will never end. The learning will never end, but it's incumbent upon us as leaders to make sure is that we are investing in our people to help them grow.
Yeah. And that learning component, we've seen this time and time again, and we studied as one of the pieces that are in the Harvard Business Review as well, is it's not just the learning and seeing, anticipating what's coming, but it's also overcoming one's own biases, right? You're speaking about tenure, right? And it's many organizations that when push comes to shove, they're going to be emphasizing the tenure component and the potential component of any particular leader, right? And we see boards falling into the same trap when they're thinking about who they're deciding to give to pass the baton to. Now we had a question from the chat about the board, and the person's asking, Carol, what advice would you have for the way that boards operate going forward, so that perspective is more complete and governance more effective? Because the CEO really
Yeah,
plays on both teams, right? It's the second team that you're playing on.
on both teams. First of all, I think it's really important for CEOs to be transparent to their
Mm.
boards.
Yeah.
Don't bring them problems. Don't bring them problems,
Mm.
but be transparent because boards can be very helpful. to
Yeah.
you if you're transparent with some of the opportunities and challenges that you may be facing. So I
Yeah.
think it's incumbent upon the CEO, and boards should be inquisitive. They
Yeah.
should ask.
Yeah.
I'll give you a true story. Before I came on board, I asked to see customer profitability because I was questioning whether or not we were making money on our largest customer. And I
Yeah.
asked to see customer profitability. I was told it was too hard to calculate. Hmm,
Hmm.
not so much, right? Because when I got on board, I'm like, I'd like to see customer profitability, and of course, I saw it.
Right.
So if you have a question, if you have a question about something, don't stop until you get that answer
Yeah.
because it will just make it better. Boards are there to help, right? Not to manage, not to run, but to help. So I
Right.
think that's an important part of it. I also think having meetings without the CEO present. So I've done that since the beginning. Each of our board members meets with our executive leaders and it rotates on a
Yeah.
quarterly basis. I'm not present in the meetings. I don't review the materials. They can talk about whatever. And I'm comfortable enough with my leadership team to let them do that.
Yeah.
And I'm comfortable enough with my board to let them do that. It's a question of developing trust. Trust
Yeah.
is really, really important here. It's really important. The decision to glide down our largest customer's volume by 50%,
Yeah.
effectively kind of firing a customer,
Who
you got to
likes to
make sure you
fire a
got
customer?
support
Yeah.
for that,
Yes.
right?
Right.
So it
Yeah.
wasn't just one day I decided, hey, we're going to go do this.
Right.
We built the argument for this. We built
Yeah.
the argument for this over a number of board meetings
Right.
so that when the decision was actually called, 100% support.
Yeah. Well, you call it comfort and trust, right? Some of your peers would call it courage, and you had to do a couple of courageous decisions along your course, right? You had to take the company in a completely different direction after COVID and after the scaling that it was required. You're now in this process of reconfiguring the company in a very different way. You're talking about, firing a customer, um, setting up your supply chain and your operating networks in a very different way. How do you think about these decisions when it cuts against something that you've effectively built?
Well, it's really about a repositioning.
Mm,
And what got us here wasn't going to get us to where we needed to go.
yeah,
We need to lean in segments of the market that value our end to end network.
yeah,
We need to serve them better than anybody else. We need to grow. We need to grow,
yeah,
but grow in the right way. So, I'm okay with that actually. I'm really okay with that. The world has changed. The world has changed in a big way. We got to understand it and move on.
the big hurdle that I see in my work, sort of you're coming from a very low ego perspective, knowing that the world has changed, therefore the assumptions have
Yeah,
changed, right? But it's this the
it's okay.
going against one's own decision in the past is often oh, how is that going to reflect on me, right?
Yeah, no, I think you just got to understand. Um, this isn't about you. It's about everybody else. It's
Yeah,
about the people that work for you. It's about the customers that you serve. It's the communities in which you work, live, and play. I mean, our shareholders, we're not CEOs of companies anymore. We're CEOs of communities.
yeah,
And you gotta understand that. This is not about you
yeah,
at all. This is about everybody else.
yeah, yeah. Now you're running into what we call the feedback paradox, right? Like it's been sort of in the study of of these stages of CEO performance. Year 6 is a striking one, right? Like from the get-go, the second that you're being named the CEO, right? You grow taller, wiser, funnier, and there's a certain echo chamber that's beginning to insulate you from what's really going on. And that echo chamber we've seen growing and growing and growing. Now, here's what's fascinating about year 6. In year 6, even in those situations where CEO has been underperforming for many, many years, boards become very reluctant to oust them, right? You would think how a board has oversight, right? A board's beginning to be more deferential and obedient to the
Mm.
CEO in many ways, right? They can no longer imagine a future without that any one particular. So how do you break through that echo chamber that you're still getting to the source of truth, getting those dissenting voices? What are some techniques that you can help others be better at hearing, having the pulse better at their fingertips?
Well, first of all, I think I'm pretty self-aware.
Yeah.
So when I go home at night, I ask myself, what could I have done better today? And I kind of give myself a grade. I'm pretty self-aware, and there's some things I could do better for sure. So
Yeah.
I work at that. I also have a personal board of directors, people who will give me feedback, and
Awesome.
that's
Yeah.
super helpful, super helpful. And I would certainly encourage everybody that. And then third, and this is really great for me, and I'm so very fortunate in that our board chair, Bill Johnson, he's a straight shooter.
Yeah.
I have a call with Bill every 2 weeks,
Yeah.
every 2 weeks. And, I give him an update and he gives me feedback and I listen to it. And it's really helpful. He's not running the company. He's not telling me what to do, but he's giving me feedback
Right.
and helping me think through, which is, I think, super happy. I also have a personal coach. You know what? I'm 69 years old and I have a personal coach
Right.
and I've had one for 6 years. And why not?
Why
The
not?
person
Right.
can give you, that person can give you feedback.
It's yeah.
So I think it's important, right? It's really important.
And it is the same, right? Like we're looking back 20 years, a coach was someone who sort of, it's the get out of jail card, right? It's the last resort. It's being viewed as such. But when we think about any high performing athlete, it's not having just one coach, right? These days, we're thinking about the offensive coach, a defensive coach, the nutritional support, the motivational, the psychological support, right? It's what we've learned in sports and other disciplines. I mean, so much of that is applicable to the most important corporate athlete, right?
I think so.
Yes.
I do.
Well, coming back to what you said earlier, it's like I wish I had known more about this reinvention stage and had thought more deliberately about it, had more time to prepare myself for it. There's the continuum here as we're thinking about the legacy stage, right? Sort of as you're thinking about traversing that complacency trap, taking the right action, and you've laid out the way that you're reinventing UPS. How do you make sure that you stay in reinvention mode until you're getting to those later stages?
Yeah. So we are leaning into what we call one UPS,
Mhm.
no longer a small package carrier,
Yeah.
but a provider of logistics services, end to end, from procurement to final mile.
Yeah.
And what this will mean, supply chains are complicated. What this means is that we will absorb the complexity and present simplicity to
Yeah.
our customer. And in order for us to do that, and the addressable market, if you do this right, is over $700 billion. So
Mm.
the prize is big.
Right.
But in order to do that, we're going to need to change. We're going to need to change our billing. We're going to need
Yeah.
to change our pricing. There's some organizational changes that we're going to have to make. We'll have to think about how we change and we pay our salespeople. We're going to need to change. This change isn't going to happen overnight. This
Yeah.
change is going to happen over a period of time. And there's an old Chinese proverb that says, wise men, I'll say wise women, know to plant trees now, understanding that they may not sit under the shadow of the leaves.
Mm.
So we're going to do all of this now and lay out a path for the next several years
Yeah.
that will ensure that the reinvention stage continues and delivers, value for our shareholders, opportunities for growth for our people, a great customer experience, and better communities than where we live.
It's a beautiful imagery as I'm thinking about lying under a tree on a nice sunny day. So it's a big quality of life component to that.
Yeah.
And as you're thinking about sort of the legacy of building the tree for someone else, but where do you get the quality of life for yourself? What are those trees that you can? I mean, it's an incredibly demanding job. How do you balance that, right? And balance may not be the right word for it, but how do you build in those re-energizing moments to yourself to get the energy that you require on a daily basis?
Well, I think actually I'm pretty balanced because I
Mm.
believe in balancing in the moment.
Yeah.
Because there's no such thing as life work balance. But if you balance in the moment, you can be very balanced. So Claudius, right now, all I'm thinking about is talking to you. That's it.
Yeah.
When we're done, I'm not thinking about you anymore. I'm moving on to
Don't
the
break my
next
heart.
moment. Sorry, but I'm moving on to the next moment. And if you can balance in the moment, you can find that you have real balance. I've been married for 42 years. I don't see my husband that often, but when we're together, we don't our phones aren't up.
Yeah.
We're actually present with each other. So that is an important part. I'm also a woman of faith, and that helps for me tremendously.
Yeah.
So I'm incredibly blessed, and I rely on faith and to guide me, and give me grace. And finally, I'm also very blessed that I have a farm, and it's only 2 hours away from Atlanta, but 2 hours out of Atlanta, out in a beautiful location where there are deer and turkey and horses and
Yeah.
bears and all kinds of wonderful things. It's a great way to retain balance.
Some great techniques. Thank you for sharing those. And I know we're hitting time already. I could go on for hours with you and keep on learning, and hopefully there'll be moments to continue that. But I think what you pointed out there, that the paradox of being in the moment, being present, yet also realizing that change is constant and actually change is the default, not the status quo. Navigating those two pieces are so incredibly important to continue to evolve and mature and grow. And Carol, thank you for taking half an hour out of your incredibly busy day. And we won't take it, we won't hold it against you that you'll forget about us in a moment. But thank you for joining us and sharing all those important lessons.
My pleasure. Thank you.